Moving on, immigration. A hot-button issue for racists and reformists alike, and something that Uncle Sam has come to terms with by building detention centers. As Matt Taibbi writes in his book, The Divide, American Injustice in the Age of the Wealth Gap, the gigantic, menacing complex of bars, chains, buses, and airplanes built to deal with the immigrant poor stands in stark contrast to the tiny, disorganized confederation of perhaps a few hundred lawyers policing transnational financial companies. We don't have special jails for foreigners or executives from foreign firms who steal by the million or billion. Instead, Taibbi notes, some of the biggest investors in private prison companies are the too-big-to-fail banks. So ironically, the very brokest people in America, Hispanic immigrants, are one of America's last great cash crops. Ah, yes, it all ties together, doesn't it? There's yet another reason to move your money from big banks like Wells Fargo, for instance, who has nearly $100 million invested in GEO, plus another $6 million in CCA. Those are private for-profit prison corporations. B of A, General Electric, Fidelity, and Vanguard are some of the others, and there are many, many more. These companies literally make money off of caging human beings, and that includes kids. Setting outrageous price tags on not only freedom, but things like prepaid phone cards. I'm having trouble today. Must be the spray paint. Shoving the price to 3 or 4 times the actual value, knowing that detainees will be desperate to make contact with friends and family. One such abominable detention center is in Aurora, Colorado. This detention center specializes in immigrants and, as we shall hear, tearing families apart. And that's precisely why Sarah Jackson decided to put her Casa de Paz right across from it. Modeled after a similar hospitality home in Georgia, Jackson seeks to offer shelter, food, and warmth, both physical and emotional, for former detainees and their families. Last week, Sarah spoke to us about the Casa de Paz and her twisted neighbor across the street. Take a look. How did you become aware of the detention center, and talk a little bit about how are other people in the community affected by it, either indirectly or directly? Do people know what goes on there?
So there's actually a group that does a protest slash vigil, prayer vigil, of the first Monday of every month, right on the corner of where the detention center is. And the detention center is pretty well hidden. If you were just driving past it, you wouldn't know that it was there. It just looks like a big warehouse, and it's kind of in an industrial part of Aurora. So you just don't even blink an eye. And so a lot of the people who live at the apartment complex where Casa de Paz is really didn't even know that there was a detention center there. And then once they started seeing guests come and different people in and out all the time, and we started talking about what I'm doing, that's kind of how a lot of people started to get educated about what goes on right across the street. So the protest, I went there one week just to see what they do and to understand what they were trying to accomplish in their monthly meetings there on the corner. And one of their goals is actually to raise awareness in the community that a detention center is right there.
Talk a little bit about what you found out that happens there. I know that you've had guests that have stayed at Casa de Paz that have told you about their experiences. What have you learned that goes on there? And talk a little bit about how they even end up there in the first place as well.
So there's a variety of reasons why people would end up in a detention center. They could have been, their work could have been raided, and then they found out that they were living here without papers. Somebody could have turned them in to ICE. Unfortunately, what happens quite often is, either a married couple or boyfriend, girlfriend, or just friends, they'll get into a fight, and one of them knows that the other one is undocumented, and they'll turn them in. They could have been, had a traffic offense, a speeding ticket, running a red light, DUI, something like that, and then been found to be undocumented and put into the detention center. And then there are some people who have actually committed crimes, who have served time in prison, and then after their time in prison, they are transferred to a detention center where they're then working out their immigration status. And life in the detention center I've never lived in a detention center. I've been in the detention center, so I can see from my observations and hear from the stories of the guests. It's just very hopeless. You are in one room, your dorm, 24/7. You eat there, you sleep there, you take showers, you go to the bathroom, you read. There's no access to going outside. They don't have like a track that you can walk around. They have another room that's attached to their dorm that basically just doesn't have a ceiling on it, and that's their way that have access to fresh air. And they're in that dorm room 24/7 unless they have somebody come and visit them, like a friend or a legal visit. Although the majority of people who are in immigrant detention they can't afford legal access. Or they could also potentially leave their dorm room if they have a job. So the detention center in Aurora is run by this corporation called GEO. It's a private prison industry, and ICE, Immigration Customs and Enforcement, contracts with. So ICE goes to GEO and says, "Hey, can you hold X amount of people for us in your facility?" And GEO agrees, and they come up with a price of how much ICE is going to pay GEO per day per person. And so GEO, and there's another big corporation called CCA. Those are the two big players with the private prison industry. I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar industries, so they're making lots of money. And 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 not only are they making a ton of profit, but they're also using immigrant labor. So the people who are detained in the detention centers have the chance to work in the detention center. Not everyone can get a job because the jobs are limited, but that the work is like cleaning and cooking and doing maintenance. And for a full day's work, they're compensated $1 a day. So some people actually want to get a job because it gets their mind off of, it kind of passes time a little bit faster. The money does come in handy because they can buy minutes to talk on the phone, or they can buy food in the commissary, which is outrageously overpriced, obviously, just trying to extort as much money as they can, GEO and CCA, while somebody's detained. But some people will not work because they feel like that is a completely undervalue of what they are worth, $1 a day.
Do you know how many of your tenants are released because they are being? I'm assuming that all of them are released just sort of out into the world because they've been allowed to stay. What is the situation once they're released? I mean, maybe they have a few dollars from their work in the detention center, but what is the system doing to them or with them once they are released from the detention center?
So actually, not most of the people that come and stay at the house have not been given legal status yet. They're still in the middle of fighting their case. They've paid a bond, which can be anywhere from $1,500 to $20,000. They've paid a bond to um, to the prison, saying, that they're not a flight risk and that they're going to show up at all their court appearances, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the people who are released do have legal status. They've won their asylum case, or they whatever the situation happened. Um, but most of the people that actually come through have not won their case yet. They're still in legal limbo. So they don't have legal access. They don't have the papers to work legally in the United States. And they still, every couple of months have a court appearance where they're still fighting their case. So if you can, and even a lot of the people who are released and they've won their cases, they still don't have a work permit because there's many steps in the process. So I don't think I've ever met anybody who's been released from the detention center who has a work permit in their hand that says, "Look, I'm legally able to work in the United States." So all of the people who have been released and actually want to get a job, they're doing it with no work papers. And the detention center has no responsibility to help integrate them into the community or to get them into a long-term living situation or job training or anything. I mean, they'll just open the doors and be like, "Congratulations, you're free," and then they're just got to figure it out.
Right, and then of course, if they work and they have to work to survive, I'm assuming, then they might end up in the similar position that they were in to begin with, getting caught working without papers, and so the cycle just sort of continues. So I'm
And
assuming,
it's set up to be that way because these prison corporations are making money, and that's all they care about.
yeah. And of course, that speaks to the lack of prison reform and our broken immigration policy all at the same time. To learn more about Sarah Jackson's Casa de Paz and to donate and/or volunteer, visit casadepazcolorado.org.